We will go out in the world and we will say who we are. We will lift our voices strong and face the tide. There is one prevailing justice and it's ours to uphold. We will go out into the world. We will go out in the world.
Hello, and welcome to the weekend worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. A warm welcome to each one of you. Wherever you are right now, whoever you are, whatever brings you here today, we are so glad to have you with us. If this is your first time visiting our online services, or if you're still relatively new to our church community, please know that you are our honored guest. We're so grateful that you're here. Please visit our website or check out our social media channels to learn more about our community and keep up with what we're doing here in this church. Just a couple of announcements as we get underway. First, as you know, our beloved senior minister, the Reverend Tom Goldsmith, will be preaching his last sermon here at First Unitarian on May 16th. That's the date of our annual congregational meeting. It's going to be a big day in the life of our church, so please mark your calendars now. Now, we have a celebration team that has been working very hard to send Tom off to retirement in style, with lots of fun events and other special things. In fact, there's so much going on that you might have trouble keeping track of it all. So for the very latest updates, the team has put together a document detailing all the things and all the dates, and you'll find a link to that document in this week's Torch email, which should already be in your inbox. Take a look at it, and let's celebrate Tom's wonderful work with us over these 34 years. Second announcement is a praise report and a reminder to get your pledge cards in as we wrap up our annual pledge campaign. I'm so happy to report that we are more than halfway to our goal, with about half of our pledges in already. We have 11 new pledges, folks who've never pledged to our church before but are taking that step this year, and we are so grateful for you. Now, here's some even better news. You'll remember that one of our goals this year was to have 50 families increase their pledges. And I want you to know that with only half of our pledges in so far, we have already sailed past that goal. 66 families have committed to increase their pledges, and 40 of those families are increasing 20% or more. I am so humbled by this demonstration of your commitment to our congregation, even in these unusual circumstances we're facing together, and especially your commitment to supporting our wonderful staff. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you. Now, the challenge remains for those of you who haven't gotten in your pledges yet. Our wonderful pledge team will start making phone calls this week, just giving you that gentle nudge to get your cards in so that we can start finalizing next year's budget before our May meeting. I want to see how far we can go past those goals that we set at the beginning. Can we double our original goal and see 100 families increase their pledges? I think we can. The future that we're building together is irresistible, and we want everyone to be a part of it. Thank you so much for everything you're doing to make it happen. And now, let us begin our service with the lighting of the chalice, today with these words by Max Kutz. May God, the mind that sees our faults, the tears that sting our wounds, the laugh that soothes our aches, and the love that redeems us all be illuminated by the light we kindle in this house of faith.
When we're talking about people's big ideas, the idea of God has to rank pretty high up there. People have always questioned, created stories, dreamed, wondered, tried to figure out, and disprove the idea of a divine higher power. I have a book that wrestles with this idea too, trying to see where a group of people can find God. It's called God in Between. God in Between, written by Sandy Eisenberg Sasso, illustrated by Sally Sweetland. Once there was a town at the foot of a hill, with no roads and almost no windows. Without roads, the people of the town had nowhere to go, and they wondered what was on the other side of the hill. Whenever they tried to leave their homes, they would sneeze through tall, tangled weeds, tumble into deep holes, and trip over rocks as large as watermelons. Without windows, they would sleep late into the day, and they would often wonder when the sun turned into night, turned into morning. Their houses were closed up like boxes sealed with tape. They could never look out, and their neighbors could never look in. The people became tired of sneezing through tall weeds, tumbling into deep holes and tripping over rocks as large as watermelons, of seeing nothing and going nowhere. So they made their way to the center of the town to decide what to do. One of the townspeople spoke up. "I have heard there is a God, and when people find God, God solves their problems." "Let us find this God," someone shouted, "and God will build windows and roads for us." Others thought that this was a ridiculous notion. People just pretend there is a God. If God were real, God would find us. Yet the people could not see any other way to fix their town, so they decided to look for God. But there was one problem. Without roads, the people could not go anywhere, least of all go searching for God. They looked toward the edge of town where two old houses stood, each with a single window. They called the man and the woman who lived in these houses the ones who could see out windows. If they can see out windows, reasoned the people, perhaps they could see a way to God. So the people of the town sent the ones who could see out windows to search for God. The ones who could see out windows thought that God must be on the other side of the hill, somewhere they had not been yet. They wove their way through the tangled weeds, around deep holes, and beyond the large rocks to find God. When they disappeared beyond the hill, some people thought they would never return. The woman who could see out the windows went to a tall mountain. The climb was steep, and when she finally reached the mountain's peak, her body shivered from the cold. She was breathless. She gazed up at the sky and tried to tug on one of the clouds. She looked down to the ground and watched the earth spin in a dizzy dance, but she did not see God. The woman who could see out windows thought that God might be in the deep waters that covered so much of the earth. So she set sail on a ship that went far out into the ocean. One day, the sea waters turned from placid blue to angry foam. The storm stirred up the depths, and the ship tossed and turned in the waves. The woman imagined what it would be like to tumble around in the belly of a big fish. But as the ship swayed back and forth, she felt as if she had a whole school of fish in her belly. The woman could no longer seek God in the ocean. She could only search on dry land. Meanwhile, The man who could see out windows traveled to the desert. He listened for God in the desert winds and looked for God in the sands. The sun burned the man's skin, and the hot ground made blisters on his feet, but he did not find God. The man thought that he might find God in the cool quiet of a cave. He searched in the dark for God, and he listened for God in the silence. At first, the cave's wet walls soothed his sunburned skin. But then the black shade turned to thick ink, and he imagined scary sounds. The man became very lonely in the cave, and he did not see God. The ones who could see out windows were tired and decided to stop looking for God. Each hoped the other had been successful on the journey. But when they met, the woman saw the man's drooping shoulders, and the man saw the woman's sad eyes. They knew that neither had found God. The woman put her cool hand on the man's sunburned arm, and the man wrapped his blanket around the woman. It was a dark, moonless night, and the ones who could see out the windows could see nothing but each other. In a soft, small voice, they talked long into the evening. They told each other their stories. When the dawn lightened the sky, the man said, "It's time to go home," and the woman agreed. One of the townspeople was sneezing through the tangled weeds when he saw the ones who could see out windows approaching the town. He called to the others, and they came sneezing through the tall weeds, tumbling into deep holes and tripping over large rocks to greet the man and the woman. "Tell us," they shouted, "where is God?" The woman, who could see out windows, told her story. "I climbed a tall mountain. I traveled on the waters that cover our earth, but I did not find God." The man who could see out windows told his story. "I walked across the desert sands that spread like hot white fire over the land. I sat alone in a cave. Others have sought God in these places, but I did not find God here." The people called out, "We were right all along. There is no God." The townspeople's voices became louder and louder. They were so busy complaining about all the problems in their windowless, roadless town that they forgot about the ones who could see out windows and about God. Days passed, and everything was the same in this windowless, roadless town, except for one thing. The ones who could see out windows helped each other put windows in each room of their homes. Then the man and the woman cut the weeds, filled the holes, and cleared the rocks to build a road between their houses. The townspeople were stunned. "We have never been able to have any roads in this town, and we have never seen so many windows. How did you do that?" "With God's help," answered the ones who could see out windows. "But you told us you had gone to the mountains and the sea, to the desert and the cave, and there was no God." "We journeyed for hundreds of miles looking for God, and then we found each other," said the woman. "And we discovered God was with us," added the man. "With you? Right here?" puzzled the town people. "At home?" "Wherever we are," answered the woman who could see out windows. "What about what lies beyond the hill, the mountains, the seas, the desert, the cave?" asked the townspeople. "Wherever we are," said the man who could see out the windows. "But I can't see God anywhere," insisted one of the men of the town. "I just see you. If God is here, show us where." The ones who could see out windows spoke in a whisper. The townspeople gathered close to listen. The setting sun blushed the sky a deep red, and a breathless silence embraced the town. "God is in the between," said the ones who could see out windows. In between us.
Today, I bring you a reading by the poet Nancy Shaffer. that which holds all. Because she wanted everyone to feel included in her prayer, she said right at the beginning several names for the holy. Spirit, she said, Holy One, Mystery, God. But then thinking these weren't enough ways of addressing that which cannot fully be addressed, she added particularities, saying, Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Ancient Holy One, mystery we will not ever fully know, gracious God, and also Spirit of this earth, God of Sarah, Gaia, Thou. And then, tongue loosened, she fell to naming superlatives as well. Most creative one, greatest source, closest hope, even though superlatives for the sacred seemed to her probably redundant. But then she couldn't stop. One who made the stars, she said, although she knew, technically, a number of those present didn't believe the stars had been made by anyone or thing, but just luckily happened. One who is an entire ocean of compassion, she said, and no one laughed. That which has been present since before the beginning, she said, and the room was silent. Then, although she hadn't imagined it this way, others began to offer names. Peace, said one. One my mother knew, said another. Ancestor, said a third. Wind, rain, breath, said one near the back. Refuge, that which holds all. A child said water. Someone said Kuan Yin. Then womb, witness, great kindness, great eagle, eternal stillness. And then there wasn't any need to say the things she thought would be important to say. And everyone sat hushed until someone said, Amen.
I'd also like to take a moment to welcome everyone to our worship service here today at the First Unitarian Church in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's good to have you with us wherever you might be as you're watching this. What a strange feeling. You could be anywhere in the world and somehow still be plugged into this church. I love it. I just love thinking about it. You know, it occurred to me while contemplating the topics of my last few remaining sermons, it occurred that I've never really said very much about God. In fact, I've spent most of my 46 years of ministry trying to avoid the topic as best I could. When I told the staff here during the week that the sermon was entitled God, they all kind of leaned forward, expecting to have just another qualifying comment, sort of like God, the uppity up. And I said, no, I'm just going to use the word God as the title. I've never talked about God, and it's certainly about time that I do. And then they all looked down as if they had dropped a pencil or something. I felt so alone, just God and I, going to try to figure stuff out. Let me tell you, it isn't easy. I'm reminded of Houston Smith, the famous authority of world religions, who once said, "A man trying to understand God is like a dog contemplating man. He knows something about the other, but really not very much." Now, if you've had a dog, you know exactly what he means by this. You know, you probably had a dog who kind of stared at you, real cute, kind of wondering, who are you really? What are we going to do next? So I think, so Houston Smith just captured it perfectly. You know, I read not long ago that sociologist Wade Clark Ruth estimated that 95% of Americans, 95%, say they believe in God. That's a jolting statistic, especially when juxtaposed with the many religious sociologists who make the claim that our ideas about God were mostly formed in our childhood. So either we live in a very puerile society, or we are terribly confused about what God means in our adult years. I'd like to think that if 95% of us actually believe in God, we would be a much nicer country. We'd treat everyone more fairly. And of course, Bernie would be president. That is no question about it. Whatever happened to fearing God? Where that Michelangelo image looking down upon us from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel commanded our devotion to making this an earthly paradise. You know, it just may be that almost all of us believe in God. Yeah, that could be. But probably, in all likelihood, not the God to whom we prayed as a child before jumping into bed. Now, as adults, we are left to stitch together our own concept of God. That's a pretty big task, especially since all theologians agree that God is indescribable. So I honestly think that most people don't want to figure God out for themselves. It's too much work. And so people will go along with whatever the doctrines are, and they say, God, yeah, whatever. Trying to prove the existence of God is a mighty slippery slope. There's a wonderful story I just love to return to again and again about a university in England. This is now during the 1700s, when a group of Christians there endowed a lectureship called the Boyle Lectures. That's B-O-Y-L-E, the Boyle Lectures. And the intent of these lectures was to present cogent and contemporary reasons for affirming belief in the Christian God. But after 4 years, the original benefactors of the Boyle Lecture grew mighty disillusioned and stopped the series altogether. Why? Well, they said that virtually no one doubted the existence of God until the lectures tried to prove it. I think what was true then, and it's probably even more true now, is that the traditional anthropomorphic figure in the sky who works 24 hours a day keeping us in line has been suspect from the very beginning. You know, it's kind of misleading to propose that 95% of us believe in the very God who was taught to us while in Sunday school, with the exception, of course, if you went to a Unitarian Sunday school. We take an altogether different approach about indoctrinating our children. It's like that great story of the 7-year-old who asked her Unitarian Sunday school teacher, is there really a God? And the teacher said, well, what do you think? It feels probably a whole lot more accurate to say that most people, including Unitarian Universalists, would be apt to say that they're comfortable with the word God to describe something that, well, they're not really very clear about. Now, you don't have to be an anthropologist to appreciate the fact that humans created religion at the same time as they created works of art. Isn't that a fascinating piece of information? We created religion and art just about the same time. I believe that both art and religion point to humans as fundamentally spiritual animals. And I'm using spirituality as shorthand for attempting to find meaning and value in life. Wonder, mystery are two components of life going back to the beginning of human experience in this beautiful yet terrifying world. Beauty, wonder, awe, we're still trying to wrap our arms around these ideals, these concepts today. But if we step back and try to imagine the primordial nature of Homo sapiens, it would be, well, religious. That's basically who we are. But it's religious in the profound attempt to make meaning, to discover meaning in this world. We are, yes, fundamentally religious, massaging all those religious sensibilities, pondering, questioning. We are religious, but not really theistic. We are not really, in our primordial nature, invested in a supreme being that exists somewhere in the heavens. You know, that came much later as an invention of the human mind. You didn't need a childhood image of God in order to discern the ultimate meaning of human life, or at least try to. God, it is safe to say, in the world of religious anthropology, God in the heavens is a projection of human needs and human desires. Karen Armstrong, perhaps my favorite religious writer, shares her own religious growth and development formed after extensive research and countless conversations with leading clergy persons of all faiths. Her conclusion is instructive in its simplicity and may well resonate with most of us. The tough lesson she learned was that instead of waiting for God to descend from on high, it is she who must deliberately create a sense of God for herself. So having once assumed that God existed as a reality out there, she was waiting to experience God as an objective fact that could be discovered. Instead, she has learned that God is a product of the creative imagination, like art, music, poetry, in which we find inspiration. And then she delivers the punchline. She says, God does not really exist, and yet God is the most important reality in the world. Well, in an effort to move a little closer in trying to understand what she may mean by that, I think what will be helpful is that I want to share two stories about God. One is found in the Quran, and the other in the Hebrew Scriptures. These stories about God are obviously packed with a lot of meaning, while also making evident, at least to me, why Christianity feels very alien in terms of coming to understand God. Well, let's start off with the Quran. It's a great story about a mystifying journey taken by Muhammad from Mecca to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He's been transported while asleep by Gabriel on a celestial horse. On arrival, he is greeted by none other than Moses, Abraham, Jesus, and a crowd of other prophets. You know, I always thought what a pity that they all abstained from alcohol, because, you know, this could have been the most remarkable cocktail party ever recorded in the history of the world. But, oh well, be it as it may. Even so, all these noteworthy religious icons confirmed Muhammad in his own mission, in his own prophetic mission. So then, after getting acquainted with all, Moses and Jesus and all that, Muhammad begins his perilous ascent up a ladder through the 7 heavens. Each one was presided over by a prophet. Finally, Muhammad reaches the top rung of the ladder, the divine sphere. He did not see God. So proof of God evaded even Muhammad. What he did see, however, were the symbols, most notably the Laudate tree, which was veiled in a veil of splendor, just dazzling as you might imagine. But we need to know that the Laudate tree marks the limit of rational thought. The prophet Muhammad learns that God cannot be comprehended through the experiences of thought and language. So, I conjure up this image of Muhammad on the top tier of heaven, and he sees the low tree, and next to the low tree is posted a sign that says, "No trespassing beyond this point." That's it. You cannot possibly comprehend what lies beyond this point. The ascent to heaven is a symbol of the furthest reaches of the human spirit, which marks the threshold of ultimate meaning. But let me add a significant piece to all this. For Muhammad, the experience revealed, at least the way it is explained in the Quran, is explained that God is not the same for everyone. Isn't that amazing to find in Scripture, in Holy Scripture? God is not the same for everyone. There are cultural differences, minimally, and maybe that's what somehow came to mind when Muhammad was up there socializing with Moses and Jesus, and so forth. So he had this opportunity to rub elbows with the leaders of the three monotheistic religions. And he probably went through a very interesting process. He kind of felt that fundamentally, God simply cannot provide the one universal solution for the most profound religious questions, such as, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Where am I going? So on and so forth. That one truth can never be discerned. And in contrast, we have this scientific proclivity of simply going to the lab and find the empirical evidence to prove this, that, and the other. But there are no theological solutions that have universal application. If God has so many different meanings, then how can anyone prove that their God is the only God that really exists? You cannot test for God. You cannot test for God empirically. God is not an object in want of discovery. So let's move along to the Old Testament. And this is from the first book of Kings. And it kind of helps us separate the scary image of God in our childhood from the more adult search for meaning. The central character in this story is Elijah, whom we all know was a bit of a hothead. He acted before he thought. There were a series of events. We don't need to get into them all. It's complicated. But he finally took some action way too quickly, and he ended up killing about 50 pagan priests before he realized, this isn't good. Queen Jezebel put out a contract on him, and Elijah flees into the Sinai desert. He goes through some serious self-examination. At first he feels sorry for himself. Yeah, he sure made a mess of things. He realizes that. And then he got to thinking about, what had he really done with his life? That's a question that vexes us even today. I mean, you ever stop and think, my goodness, I'm in such and such an age. What have I really done with my life? While Elijah, out in the desert, nature finally begins to kick in. A great wind blew, says the text, but God was not in it. Next came fire and earthquakes. Still no God. These events did not bring any remote sense of understanding. Finally, there came quietness, implying that whatever would happen to Elijah would happen in silence. I'm drawn to this story because once again we see an example of outgrowing our childhood God. In an almost cartoonish way, we saw God once upon a time as that fierce figure who speaks to us in thunderous ways, be it wind, fire, earthquakes. Whoa, the mighty forces of nature contain the voice of God, and so we tremble. But no, it's in the silence that we find the meaning that can redirect our lives. In silence, we can reflect upon what ultimately matters. In silence, we can invite mindfulness. In silence, we can experience something of the divine. We need to understand, this is so crucial, there's a huge difference between experiencing God and knowing God. Now, this is where Christianity becomes problematical, at least for me. Where Judaism, Islam, and to a large extent Christianity, all recognize an indescribable God as transcendent. It is Christianity that cultivates a most personal sense of God who does everything a human being does. He loves, judges, punishes, sees, hears, creates, destroys, just like we do. And so we move into a dangerous situation by supposing, perhaps quite naturally, that God loves what I love. God hates what I hate. It's far too easy for the Christian God to endorse our own prejudices. Just the other day, an evangelical leader said that God spoke to him. You see, that's the nature of the relationship. That's how close Christianity, at least some forms of Christianity, how close God is to human beings and human beings to God. So God spoke to this evangelical leader and told him, God said to him, I don't want people wearing masks. Imagine that. He said, no, I want to ensure that people will be safe on my own terms. I want to do that by myself. Don't wear masks. That must have been a fascinating conversation between this minister and God. And what remains so unique to Christianity then is God's accessibility. God can be called upon to support whatever an individual desires. And so rather than God being, let's say, an inspiration for compassion, stretching us out of our comfort zone so that we are perhaps our best selves, it becomes too easy to remain complacent, just keep the status quo going in the unjust ways of society. There's not much we have to do about it, really, because God feels the same way about things as I do. So if you're in that mindset, there's plenty of incentive for Christianity to prove the existence of God. It's like they want to justify their own personal relations with God. And then on the other end, you've got the famous atheists like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and most Unitarians who I know. They take great pride in disproving God. But all they're doing is disproving the personal God. They're disproving the old guy in heaven who intervenes in history and hangs around and talks to you. They set out to prove the God who died many, many years ago. And it's really a bit easy to disprove that personal God. It's a monumental waste of time. Arguing over the existence of God is something, I think we can do more productive things than that. Because even if God exists, which cannot be proved, God cannot be known. So let's move on to the real religious work that needs to be done. Meaning, purpose, values, awe, wonder, healing, justice, generosity, integrity. Then asking ourselves, what's my attitude towards the creation? Do I really see it as holy? Do I respect and appreciate and work in it as though this creation were holy? And what's my attitude about life itself? Do I really value how precious life really is? And also the need to be future-oriented. We are simply custodians of what is in this amazing yet fragile world. Do we ask, what is my role in the interdependent cosmic web? What do I need to do to provide tomorrows and tomorrows and tomorrows? Now, these are the questions that really need to occupy us, not whether or not God exists. Religion is not about determining if I've been chosen or I've been saved by God. Now, that's all religious manipulation by the institutions that want to project power through their fantasies or contrived ideas of knowing God. Religion outside of Christianity, frankly, is just not that human-centered. This may be hard to digest for many who were raised Christian, and which may be one of the reasons that Unitarian Universalism is such a small denomination. We have no relationship with a being, an object, whatever, something that is transcendent and exists in another world. But we still pursue the profound questions of life. So yes, I have, consciously avoided talking about God for 46 years. And maybe the reason for that is because I've been too busy with other things, other matters. And you too. I think that's why you are probably part of this congregation. There's so much work that we do, real work that needs to be done as we all journey forth religiously. Amen.